Here we are, bro.
Come on.
Man, welcome to Call to Surf podcast, bro.
I appreciate it.
I'm super excited to have you here, man. We talked about it for, I won't say a while, but we have talked about it for a little bit. Talked about doing this, and I'm just super excited, man. I couldn't think of anybody else who I would want to have as the first person in first episode. Just since I've known you, man, our relationship has continued to grow. We have some really, really good conversations.
Yes.
Some meaningful conversations. Some not so meaningful, but they're still fun.
Always.
And I feel like our energy matches. And I was like, hey, man, who better to help me launch this thing off than the one and only Zach Dobleman?
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah, man. I feel like every time we talked about this podcast, or even just us having a conversation, the podcast came up, or a podcast came up, and I learned pretty quickly that you are somebody that once you are through that threshold of, hey, I want to do this, those wheels are already in motion and that car's in drive, my dude. So it was pretty funny when you came and you said, hey, guess what? I'm ready. Let me know when you are.
Let's go.
I just looked at you like, what are we talking about? And then it turned out you're ready for this podcast, and you said, I want you to be on episode 1. It was humbling. I am excited to watch this thing, grow and really go from here and see where it goes and see who you get to interview. I'm super excited for it, man. So,
yeah, man. I appreciate that. I mean, the whole purpose behind Call to Serve is to honor those and to share the stories of people who serve, essentially people who put the needs of others before their own every single day. And you do that in so many capacities, you know what I mean? And I think it's just awesome. And I wanted to, really highlight your story and, just share it with the world, man. So why don't you just let us know, who is Zach Dobleman?
Yeah. Well, who am I? Well, kind of grew up in small town, South Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. Huge Philadelphia sports fan. Grew up really tight-knit community, and I still kind of attribute most of the stuff that I carry with me today really came from that, from that town and, who I grew up around, rather, family and stuff like that as well. Moved down here to Georgia. Whole family moved with me, which was awesome, and super blessed by that. Moved down here to Georgia and quickly realized that there is, life outside of small town, hometown kind of deal.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be really nice and relieving. And essentially that really was the case for me and my family. So we got out, and when we moved down here, life just kind of took a different trajectory for my whole family.
Wow.
Which was super nice. In a positive way, for sure. And again, I like to attribute a lot of the character traits to the hometown that I grew up in, for sure. And it's pretty evident by some of the other folks that grew up there as well, and some of my other family members or friends or whoever. A lot of them have those same traits. Everybody's hardworking. Everybody's, really about community and really trying to help out others, which you don't get that everywhere. You certainly don't get that in a community where it's not as everybody knows each other, essentially. I think that goes into it. I think everybody knows and everybody talks. So there's almost, I guess, an expectation, but an expectation in a good way to kind of serve others because everybody's going to know it, if that makes sense. It could be a little self-serving as well, I guess, but it's a positive thing overall. Yeah. So anyway, moved down here to Georgia. We got in here around 2011-ish, somewhere in there. And like I said, my family moving with me really kind of set me up for some major, major success in my life, right? And some pieces that honestly certainly would not have happened had I moved down here on my own. I had some other family that moved originally down here somewhere around 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. And obviously super grateful for them as well to even present this as an option. We would come down here in the summers, just kind of come hang out with them. Once I got a little bit, older through high school and stuff, and I absolutely loved it down here, and quickly realized for me growing up, I always knew I wanted to be in law enforcement. So when I saw down here that law enforcement officers were making pretty decent money, not quite as much as they were making up home, but starting pay wasn't crazy far off for an area like this. It's pretty, pretty well off as far as Georgia goes and the South goes. And I noticed that, but I also noticed they were hiring, and that was the biggest piece. Up in Jersey at that time, there was hiring freezes, there were layoffs and everything else, and I just realized the writing was on the wall pretty quickly. They were requiring college degrees for officers at certain points and everything else, and they might still be doing the same thing for most agencies, but it's been over a decade, so I think some of them have kind of relaxed some of those policies a little bit. But I realized pretty quickly that getting into public safety up there was going to take a while and was going to take a lot of further investment on myself that wasn't needed down here. And then obviously the cost of living factor into it was an easy decision. Way of life, cost of living, everything else was just super simple. So we moved down here. And then shortly after, kind of got into law enforcement around 2013-ish. And really that's when things just kind of took a good trajectory for me. That was it's when I really started to, I guess, realize in my life, getting into that adulthood stage of appreciating learning quite a bit. Felt like I was actually moving forward and challenging myself constantly, which was awesome. Getting more into that family community feel that I had for so long, but I don't want to say lost, but when you separate yourself from that, you're going to obviously seek it out in other areas. So I was finally feeling that again, which was awesome. And through that, realized the place that I worked there, when I started out, worked there for about 5 years, and then constantly realized that me and my wife, we had been dating at the time, all her family lived over on this side. My family lived over on this side. So I decided I wanted to come back to the community that I initially moved into to actually work. Plus, it was a community that was on the rise anyway, and I could kind of see that trajectory where it was back in 2018, and decided, yeah, this is going to be a good option for us long term. And I think the biggest thing for us is we were living at the time about 45 minutes away. So every time we want to do something on any of our off days, it was driving 45 minutes to come see people.
Oof.
And in our
Been there, bro.
Yeah. So it was just kind of silly, realizing why are we driving so far away? I'm driving through the county that I want to work in to get home and to go see people.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I just move back over there? So that's what we did.
Man,
and
that's awesome, dude.
Thankfully I did, because here we are.
So what did it mean to you, like, just to have that kind of family support, man? Because everybody can't say that. They don't have those type of family dynamics, or even the bonds for the whole family to get up and, like, you know what, let's head on down south.
Yeah.
Down south.
Yeah. Amazing for starters. Like I said, super, super lucky and blessed to say that the family was in a good position to be able to even do that.
Yeah. It's huge.
I'm the oldest in my family. They joke all the time, he's the golden child, whatever he is, I feed into that a little bit as well, right? I take on the normal oldest child, oldest sibling, mentality a little bit, for sure. But I also recognize there was some influence in there. And I think for me, realizing, hey, I had just gone through growing up in this community, in some of the struggles, realistically. We did not have like some, family photo on the wall kind of normal dynamic, I would say. It wasn't abnormal. For us as kids, it was growing up, it was awesome. You know, my parents did everything they could. They were super, super hardworking. I definitely attribute most of the stuff that I've been able to do all to them and watching them. But realistically, some of the other aspects of, you know, the community, the life around us, the people around us, and everything else, there were some absolute sentiments or pieces that I could see that I was like, I don't know that this is the direction, especially knowing that there's other options, I guess was the biggest piece. Coming down here and seeing what those other options were, seeing some of the schools and some of the neighborhoods and really just the communities that were down here through my aunt and my uncle and their kids and stuff like that, I realized that this might be potentially an option for my whole family at the time. And however that vision came to me or why that came to me, you know, I don't necessarily know. Yeah. But it made sense to me in my head as a kid, really, at that point, that long term this is going to be a better option and a better fit for my siblings to grow up in. And I think now watching it, now me and my brother are 7 years apart, me and my sister are 14 years apart. Now watching it where my sister just graduated and my brother and sister were able to graduate from the same school in one of the schools that, you know, we currently serve now, was really, really awesome, because the positivity and the connections that they were able to make down here and really put themselves and get themselves some roots here. I certainly don't feel like they lost anything from where we grew up to now, but I know that those stories could have been very different had they grew up where I grew up and what it is now. And I don't say that as a knock. Like, I still have family that are up there. I love them to death. They grew up in that school. I still support that school very much. But the school wasn't necessarily the problem. The community is kind of taking a turn, for sure. And it's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate, but that trajectory's been on there for decades now, right? I watched my cousins go through it when I grew up, and it just wasn't the place that I wanted them to continue to put their roots, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, man. Speaking of roots, man, you know, I know you mentioned that you kind of always knew that you wanted to be in law enforcement. When did that kind of start, or, you know, do you remember why you wanted to be law enforcement?
Yeah, early on. So my dad was in the fire service, volunteer fire service, his entire life since he was 17. So he gave up 30 plus years, I think at 31, I want to say 32, by the time he finally retired, I guess. 30 plus years of his life to public safety and to fire specifically. So I grew up in that, and where I grew up, public safety was kind of everybody's niche, right? Like, everybody in a sense felt like they had some connection to working in government in some level. And I think that's a lot of small town communities in a way. There's not necessarily jobs and opportunities right there in the town. You'd have to go outside of the town to do so or whatever. So everybody kind of found their niche inside that public safety genre somewhere. And my dad realized, I guess, at a very young age, at 17 himself, is when he finally signed up for volunteer fire. But he talks about it. You know, he would have signed up earlier if he was allowed.
Wow.
And for somebody who held multiple jobs for me growing up at multiple positions, watching my dad, just the one constant in his life was the fire department. And he was constantly there. He was constantly helping out. Weekdays, weekends, any way he could. So for me, he was very connected as well, knew everybody. And what I saw and what I noticed pretty quickly in my life is without those people being direct mentors, I learned and just watched and realized what I wanted to do by just viewing those people. So for me, wanting to be in law enforcement was because as we rode bikes around town or getting to know the folks that are around town or getting introduced to, my dad's friends or whatever who were police officers, it was, hey, these people drive some nice cars. They look nice. They're very squared away. Their morals seem intact. They're very nice people. I feel like they're doing good things. Their houses are very nice. That's something I could do. I really feel like I could get a calling into that and want to do that. And then as I grew up, I would say it's probably 14, 15 years old where I was really like dead set on that. And I'm happy in a sense that I came to that conclusion because some of the things I just talked about as far as the community goes, there were definite options to go very different routes. Some of my friends that we grew up with, some of them are no longer there. Some of them are no longer here.
Yeah.
So growing up in that, seeing that constantly, I could have very easily found myself walking right into that room the same time, right? Doing the same things that they were doing. And I don't think it has anything to do with me thinking I'm better than those people. I think for me, it was a very clear, I know what I want to do in my life long term, and this doesn't fit that. So I can't do some of the things that you're doing. I can't do I can't go to some of the places you're going.
Right.
So I would say I had a pretty strong moral compass at that point growing up. I think a lot of it came straight up from fear of my family, right? If I do those things, I'm also going to get in some serious trouble with mom and dad.
That's real.
For sure.
That's real.
We'll probably get into that a little bit. Fears from parents are a good thing.
Yes.
So for parents out there, again, we'll probably get into that, but
Fear is a gift.
fear is a gift. We should not forget that.
Yes.
It goes hand in hand with consequence and discipline, and it is a good thing to carry.
100%.
But for me, that was it, right? I knew immediately. There were plenty of things growing up. We were always getting in trouble, right? It was never enough trouble, thankfully, where we were like screwing up our lives long term, but we were doing dumb stuff constantly. It was small town. There was zero to do besides ride bikes, ding dong ditch, do all the stupid stuff that kids do, right? But we weren't out there doing drugs. We weren't out there just getting into crazy stuff like that. That wasn't the case. There were options for it, 100%. I'm just very glad that early on I realized what I wanted to do in my life fit with my morals, and I think that's where my morals were shaped, were through fear of my parents, and my opportunities in life were going to go away had I made any of those decisions.
Yeah, and it can be a sacrifice, being successful, right? And the good thing is that you knew from an early age what you wanted, right? Most people, they don't. No. So you are clearly heading in a very specific path. You had a very specific trajectory, and you knew what it is that could cost you that, and you governed your actions accordingly. So that's very commendable because, sometimes you be like, man, I can't go to places that you're going because I know what it is that I want to accomplish. And if I continue on that path, then it's not going to happen. Absolutely. But vice versa. You may not be able to go places that they're going, but they definitely can't go places that you're going.
100%.
And some people I call they're boosters in your life. They're great people. And it's kind of like a rocket. When a rocket reaches a certain altitude, the boosters, they fall off, right? And they may have helped them get to that point. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad people. It just means that they're not meant to go, or they're not equipped to go where you're going. Yeah. Those boosters are not equipped to go to the higher altitudes, to the higher positions, to reach the higher destinations. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. But I think a lot of people get caught up when they can't realize that. And, that can just take a turn.
Yeah.
100%.
That's a good point. That's a very good point, because you realize that there are definitely relationships in your life that aren't going to be forever. And it's not because visions or morals or ethics are in different places. Sometimes those things do change sometimes, but really it's destinations. It's realizing that your destinations aren't the same. And, for me, that was very evident in realizing that with all of the relationships, when I decided to tell my parents that I wanted to move 900 miles away, right? Hey, yeah, we're going to move to Georgia. And I think for them, which I still kind of wrap my head around is wild, but like for them, the decision was almost easy. I can't imagine the amount of stress they had. I can't imagine it. They had 2 younger kids who were still in school. I had just graduated.
Oof.
And their oldest son is telling them, we should all move to Georgia. But I didn't know any of it. I didn't feel any of it. I felt like almost as a family unit, we all came together and figured out, well, what do we need to do to make that happen? And it wasn't like a sit down at dinner kind of conversation. We never sat at, I don't even remember our kitchen table at our house growing up was full of mail and everything else. Like we never sat at an actual kitchen table, right? If we ate dinner together, that was crazy enough, because for the most part, I had been in sports or something, my entire life. So there was never like sit down anyway. But if there was, it certainly wasn't a time together. It was like we ate in different times completely, right? Dinner was always made. We always had dinner for sure.
Shift work.
But yeah, right. Like we were never eating together. And if we were, it was like sitting at my grandparents or eating there, or it was always on the go somewhere, which again, I appreciate most of for sure. But I think for me, that dynamic of realizing that like family is a unit, we all make this decision together, and figuring out how this was going to work, what this was going to look like had we all just decided to pick up and move. Very lucky that we were in a position where they could just move. It wasn't like we had to, wait months and months and months for a house to sell and this to move and this to, we rented pretty much our entire lives growing up, as far as I can remember. And 2011-ish wasn't obviously a great economical time for most,
right?
But my parents were in a position where they were hard workers. They saved their money. They did their jobs. Both of them had careers, basically, careers in probably positions that wouldn't normally serve as careers. It's not like they're working for Microsoft or anything else. But for me, growing up, watching my parents just work at any of the jobs they did, they gave it 100%. They were great people. They never called out of work. They were never like, I don't think I've ever remembered my parents ever being homesick, unless they were taking care of one of the kids, which for the most part still wasn't even the case. Like most of us, they'd figure out how to ship us to work with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for us as kids growing up watching that obviously instills a lot of, stuff in you and character in you. Cause you're just watching it firsthand. This is what hard work looks like constantly.
Standards, man. It's all about, standards.
100%.
Creating the standards, for yourself and for your family.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great job. Like, well done for your family, because I'm all about standards. Like we have a standards, Hub Tribe, my family, there's standards for Hub Tribe.
Absolutely.
Yes. You don't meet those standards, then some things don't happen. There's consequences.
Yeah.
Good and bad.
Yeah. We'll make some changes.
And it all starts with that, with everyone. It's just, I think a lot of people where they end up going bad is they negotiate with themselves. Mm-hmm. I don't negotiate with myself. I don't negotiate with my own mind. It's just like how you said, when I make up my mind I'm going to do something, it's done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I've told myself and I always honor commitments that I make to myself and to other people. And I think if people honor, their commitments that they make to themselves, their lives will be completely different.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what your parents did. I think that they honored the commitment that they made to themselves, as far as not calling out if they don't need to, but also the commitment that they made to their family, as far as going out there when they don't feel like going to work, to provide and to lead by example. Mm-hmm. And those type of things clearly, right, are instilled in your children. That's why you are the way that you are.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I never really thought about it this way until I got older. But for me, I kind of watched both my parents in their own completely different ways, but both of them had leadership qualities and like good boss structure qualities, if that makes sense. Like they always found themselves in positions of leadership in some way, whether it was now I'm a supervisor at whatever job they're at. But really what it came down to and how I watched it happen was just hard work. Had nothing to do with them being, significantly more intelligent than somebody. And I'm not saying that in a bad way.
No.
But it had nothing to do with those. It didn't have to do with college degrees. It didn't have to do with high school diploma. It had nothing to do with any of those things. It had to do exactly what we just talked about. They showed up to work every day. They were certainly among the top 5% of the people who worked every day. And they made no complaints, but they also found the needs of whatever place they were at and filled them consistently enough, and then found other ways to serve that place. I remember my mom, she pretty much supervised an entire daycare, and she's worked in daycare pretty much my entire life in some way, shape or fashion. She's always watched kids. She still does it. She watches mine. So, but she always found herself in some type of strong position in there, inside. So for the longest time, she worked for the same pretty much daycare facility pretty much most of my life. And she ran that place. I mean, she handled a lot of the scheduling and stuff. She handled a lot of it, but then she also realized, hey, this place, it needs to be cleaned every day. And in her own way of hey, I can provide, maybe it's a couple extra, an extra check a month. I can clean this place. I'm already here. What's the point? I can stay an additional 45 minutes to an hour and clean the entire place after everybody goes and everybody leaves. I'm already here. What's the difference? So she realized that. She did it. And that was an extra way for her own little entrepreneurial spirit. But again, I didn't realize that growing up. It was just, that's what you did. That's how you worked.
Yeah.
You found needs a place, you fulfilled those needs.
Yes.
After, kind of growing up, but my dad did the same thing, right? Growing up in Jersey, it was always hey, it's going to snow. So my dad had a plow. We hooked it up on the truck. It was as soon as it snowed, hey, kid, wake up, let's go. We're going to go, plow driveways and everything else. And we'd have that set up with contracts for people, whether it was the city or, different places, different businesses around the town or whatever. And we'd go in, we'd clear those places. And then family and friends, we would just do those for free. And then we'd show up. I'd be shoveling out there. He'd be shoveling out there. We'd be snow plowing driveways, whatever it may be. But again, it was always watching my family growing up. And it's funny how you don't realize it until you really take that perspective on yourself and you start finding little ways of yourself. But learning that trait of, I think that's what they say, hard work pays off. That's what that's what they mean, right? Showing up every day, working to the highest extent of the people that are around you. And if you feel like you're outperforming them easily, then it's time to move up. It's time to upgrade. And it's time to challenge yourself in a different way. But I think that's what I found through my parents that was kind of instilled without me even realizing it. And then obviously that kind of helped in everything else I did. And then when I realized that was as I got older and realizing that in pretty much every position I've ever held, I've worked myself into a leadership or supervisory position.
Huh.
And that's when I finally realized, it was like a moment of reflection for me of like, I guess, yeah, most of my sports, it ended up being a leadership or a captain's position somewhere. And that came down to hard work. It wasn't because I was the best person on the field or the smartest or whatever it was. I showed up every single day. I showed up ready to work every single day. I gave it my all every single day. When I was in the moment, I was present. That's what people are looking for.
Man, work ethic will beat talent every single time.
Yes, 100%.
Every single time. And it's crazy because I don't know the exact statistics, but I know they were saying, I read an article a while ago was saying how C students, like B and C students, are more likely to become successful entrepreneurs than someone that got straight A's, just because of the way that they think, and the way that they've been conditioned. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy. I think it's not crazy, but it is. You wouldn't think that just
right
on the outside looking in. And you think if you got straight A's, you got the academic scholarships, get a good degree,
yeah,
then you're going to be the most successful person. But we won't get too much into this. But I think it's when you go down that route, and that's like at the forefront of everything that you do. You're really just being conditioned to be an employee, and I think that's what it is. Just the system. Right, it's conditioning you to always work for someone.
Yes.
Yeah, dude. So the work ethic, I love that. How do you think that affects your everyday process, your everyday journey, and what it is that you do, and then the relationships that you build every single day?
I think realistically it makes it easier. There are certainly obviously times like everybody else. It's like, I think we just mentioned it. You don't want to wake up and do it every day, right? The grind of it. Like nobody wants to wake up and just do the grind, right? Like there are days when I'm 100%, I'm excited to go to work, right? There are also days when I'm at home and I don't have anything to do, where I'm dying inside to get back to work and do something. And I think that is the difference, right? It's not the grind of just waking up and doing the job every day. It has nothing to do with you waking up and saying, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to put the belt on today. I don't want to drive to work today. Whatever it may be, whatever your job is. I don't think it's those moments. It's where are those moments when you're not working, and where is that drive taking you? For me, it has always been, and I think a lot of it has to do with just the networking at work. And I don't mean that in a sense of like business, in the sense of like interaction with folks, right?
Yeah.
Having those conversations and just every day, you and I showing up to traffic every day and just sitting there and bouncing off whatever idea has come to my head, your head, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And just seeing where that conversation just unfolds. So for me, it's always been on those days off when I don't have anything to do. Those days kill me. And sometimes to the detriment of like, some home life stuff, right? Yeah. There are some sacrifices there that I realize like, hey, I need to hit the brakes. I need to actually like give back to and push into my own family and do things, right? And I found it. I found a little bit of a healthier balance for sure. Doesn't mean that it stops burning. Doesn't mean that that drive goes away. It's really just, it's over here.
Yeah.
This is more important. And that priority I've realized that priority as the years have gone on for sure.
Yeah. I like, kind of what you said. It's not about like just the everyday going through the motions. And, sometimes it's just about the impact.
Yeah.
The networking, I kind of equated that to as soon as you said networking, I just instantly thought impact.
Yes.
You know, what impact can you make today? Whose life can I change today? Even if it's the smallest thing.
Absolutely.
You know, that's why I really love what it is that we do. So, you know, law enforcement, cool, right? You've known for a long time you want to be law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
You've been in law enforcement for over a decade now. Which is actually pretty crazy because we kind of got into law enforcement around the same time. So speaking about law enforcement, what is something that you think, or some things that you wish people kind of knew about law enforcement and just what comes with it? Because I think that a lot of times people just kind of see the badge and the gun,
mm-hmm.
and they see someone who's in authority.
Yeah.
And they may think that we're kind of just robots.
Yeah.
And have no personality, have no life outside of the uniform.
100%.
You know,
I thought you slept here.
yeah.
Oh, you don't just take your car to Kroger?
Yeah. Like,
you just go grocery shopping and
yeah,
that thing.
like you gonna go work the road after this? I'm like, bro, like I'm in for 8 hours, dog.
Yeah. I just walked around this place for 8 hours. No, I'm not going to work all night too.
No.
Yeah. I would say the big thing for me, for people who don't, there's a lot of people that have the mentality, and that's fine. It's, you don't know what you don't know kind of deal. A lot of it is not coming from a place of disrespect. It's more of just unknown.
Sure.
I think for me growing up, again, getting back to the how I visioned and how I saw law enforcement, it wasn't necessarily always in a badge and a gun. It was them showing up in the community. And that is certainly one of the best aspects of the place that I grew up. Like, everybody saw everybody in their normal, if that makes sense. Right?
Yeah.
It was, if you were a cop, if you were a fireman, if you were a teacher, if you were the principal, you were the superintendent, like, everybody knew. You were the public work guy. You were the guy who worked at the county jail. It didn't matter. Everybody got to see you outside of your career and who you are, right? There's an element there of a lot of law enforcement officers don't like that. Just straight up. And I think we've conditioned them not to like that. People don't want to know your outside life. People don't need to see your outside life. Even as much, don't have a social media because people don't know you're a real person. Well, how does that help the community?
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For me growing up, I saw those people and how they grew up and how they lived their life. Now, there's an aspect of how they got to live their life in the right way, right? They can't be out there in the public knowing that they're putting on that badge and the gun.
100%.
But that is a very small amount of people who got into this job and stay in this job that are out there bringing bad light to it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And if we have all of those strict standards, where are those unique qualities going to come out? They're going to come out at work where you don't want them to come out. You don't want somebody's uniqueness, I would say. I don't know how to put it in a better. You don't want somebody showing something a little bit different necessarily while they're in the badge and uniform, right? You want them to kind of be structured in their same way. Nobody should really necessarily, I don't want to say stand out, but stand out in a bad way.
Yeah.
Right? That's probably the best way to put that. Nobody
stand
should
out in a bad way.
Nobody should stand out in a bad way.
Yeah.
Right? If you're standing out because you're, the hardest worker in the room, that's a different story. We're not talking about that. But nobody's unique abilities should stand out in a bad way while you're in uniform. If that's who you are as a person, great. Don't forget to share that. Because if you don't share it, you're going to end up sharing it at work in the wrong element or in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've really gotten away from. And again, like for me, I wouldn't have even been able to choose this career had I not seen that side of the law enforcement officers that I seen growing up. Those city police guys who my dad was like best friends with growing up, if I didn't see them outside of work, how would I have known that they had nice cars? They were dressed nice. Their families were good kids. I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have been able to easily like come to this decision. So I think for people that are looking at law enforcement in a certain view of just like, oh, they're all the same, it's robots, it's, you know, the structure of authority and all that, there's an element that has to happen, right? It's militarized to come to that element. Like it has to happen in certain aspects. It does not have to be the only thing though. That is an element of like in the moment, yeah, you need to have everybody on the same page. You need to have everybody look squared away and look the same. They need to be all in the same uniform. But that doesn't mean they don't get to show who they are.
Yeah.
Right? That person should be very involved in the community because every single one of us, the cliche when you get in, why do you want to do this job? Is I want to help the community. So why, when we get in, do we forget that and realize the only thing we're pushing for is come in, do your 8 hours, put your uniform on and do that? No, we got to get away from that. We got to push that back. We have to show up. How many times have we shown up outside of uniform and our kids see us, you know, from the places that we work, and they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't even recognize you." The staff sees us; they don't recognize us, right?
Oh no.
When I show up I'll show up to the school in the summertime when I'm off in jeans and a t-shirt, or I've had to get change after work to go somewhere, and I wasn't going in uniform, and I've gone somewhere, and I'm like, I get changed at work, you know, get in my wife's car or person, whatever it is, and I drive, and then I'll come back and get changed back again, put my uniform on, and drive my car home or whatever it may be. And people are just looking, oh my God, I didn't realize that was you, right? That's what we have to get back to. We have to get back to being involved in the community outside of work, showing that we are still involved. We still put in that effort. And I get it. Sometimes it's hard. We work a lot as it is, but that's the aspect.
Yeah.
People being involved in the communities that they work is super, super important.
Man, that's I'm definitely in agreement with that, man. It's just we gotta dehumanize we can't dehumanize ourselves, and I feel like the uniform can do that.
Yeah.
And I love that. You gotta get out there and take the initiative to be a part of your community and let people see, you know what? I'm a husband. Mm-hmm. I'm a father. I'm a friend. I'm an entrepreneur.
Yep.
Right? I'm all of these things. The uniform and the badge does not define who Reggie Hubbard is. It doesn't define who Zach Dobleman is.
That's right.
It is just a component of the life that I live.
Yes.
Right? It's a very, I don't want to say small part, but it's a chapter in my book, you know, and of the life of Reggie Hubbard. And I think we definitely got to get back to that, and we got to get, or for some of us, we got to get to it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because 30 years is going to pass, and now you retire, and now you're by yourself, you know?
And I think it's like, there are some negatives to the way that we've gone, right? There are some negatives. We talk about it. It's, how many times when you started did people tell you got to have friends outside of law enforcement? We constantly heard it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, got to have friends outside of law enforcement. You can't just have law enforcement friends. And we all heard it. None of us took that advice. Like, I don't know anybody in law enforcement that took that advice. And we use excuses and everything else of like, well, they're the only people that understand what I've been through. They're the ones that can appreciate, you know, some of the struggles and the hard times in law enforcement. And of course, that makes sense, right? It's our own version of therapy because we can't go to therapy.
Can't do that.
Right. And I totally understand that. I do. I really do. And I am the same way in an aspect of my friends are mostly law enforcement as well. But what I've realized, and one of the most freeing moments for me, and why I appreciate the job that we're in now in these schools, is because now I've been able to expand that network to open outside of law enforcement. And now I'm seeing, hey, there are some benefits of people who are outside of law enforcement. But I would never be able to get there had I not opened up my eyes to another law enforcement position, right? Because now those same people I do battle with and understand, you know, the struggles, the funny times, whatever it is, now they're like admin staff at schools or teachers or whoever, right? Now they're those people. Now I've gotten to really open up that network to, now it's maybe some booster parents or, you know, parents of kids who you know, some of the programs or whatever, right? You just get to know these people. And that's really what it comes down to. I wouldn't have made those friendships with any of those folks had they not seen me outside of uniform or been able to take that uniform veil off enough to open up and be like, oh my gosh, the officer who is at my kid's school is also a dad. That's awesome. He has a young kid.
Yeah.
He brings them to the program. Look at this. He's he's running around. He's having a,
Yeah.
he's screaming his head off. And my SRO's like going through the stress of adulthood and parenthood, right? That's an important aspect for people to see, because then they're like, man, that guy's going through the same stuff I went through. I remember that. I remember when my kid was that age. And I was getting secondhand embarrassment from him screaming around all the other adults, right? And I think that part's important. People have to see you with your own vulnerabilities, if you will.
Yeah, and it creates a common ground. It creates a connection, because the uniform and the badge naturally separates us from the rest.
Yes.
And I think most people are intimidated by it. Mm-hmm. Because it essentially, it puts you in a position of authority.
It does.
And it gives you the powers to literally take someone's freedom.
Yeah.
And that's a huge responsibility. That's a lot of authority. The amount of authority that we actually have is significant.
Yeah.
The discretion that we have is significant.
What's crazy to me is the amount, and I realized that once I got in, and I wouldn't even say it was immediate. It was just a gradual progression of like how many times we live in the gray area, and the decision is solely yours.
Yeah.
And that decision can change if I made the decision or you made the decision, based on what your perspective is.
Yes.
And I'm not just talking about arrests or anything else. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking how many times we get presented, because we're in that uniform, there's an expectation of knowledge that already comes with it, whether you have it or not.
Facts. Big facts.
There's an expectation of knowledge. So everybody will look to you immediately to have the answer. And that answer can change if I give it, you give it, or anybody else. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in an aspect like it's crazy and that needs to change, and how do we change that?
It's mind blowing.
That just needs to be the expectation.
Yeah.
Like, how you present the facts to me is how I'm perceiving the situation. That's an important aspect of how that turns out, right? And the amount of gray area with that amount of power is certainly how decisions can come, and people can be confused. How did you come to that decision? Well, based on what I was presented, it was pretty easy, right? This is my perspective. If Reggie was presented that same one, I don't know. Maybe the decision is slightly different. Hopefully not. Probably not. But there's at least a gray enough area to say, yeah, there's a good chance it could happen.
Yeah.
And that was the craziest thing for me. But you're right. I think just that level of authority when you're showing up, that immediate kind of like taken back by everybody that is there once you show up in the room, is like, oh, things just got real.
Command presence, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously that's needed. That's very important. I think when people only live in that element of law enforcement for periods of time, I think that overtakes some people, and that can be a problem. I think good change every 4 to 5 years is very positive for people. I think sometimes that's why you have officers or people in the military have that same kind of mentality when they've stayed in the same positions for long times of after about 4 years, you've pretty much had most situations that you're ever going to come across, and you've handled. Now you're starting to repeat handle those situations, right?
Yeah.
Little subtle differences for sure, but for the most part, they're same situations just coming up your time and time again. So you've pretty much mastered the craft, if you will, after about 4 or 5 years. And I think that is the period where you're no longer challenging yourself. And as humans, we have to be constantly challenging ourselves. Our brain's going to go on autopilot. We're going to start getting complacent and everything else. I think for me, consistency and complacency aren't brothers and sisters, but they're pretty close cousins.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's an element where you have to be consistent, but there's also an element when you're staying consistent long enough that you're going to start to get complacent very quickly.
100%.
And I think that's a very teetering balance that you have to stay on, but challenging yourself is what takes you out of it.
Yeah. And, I want to share my favorite quote personally. I have it, like tattooed over my heart because it means so much to me. When I was a young soldier in the Army, it was my squad leader at the time. At the time, he was Staff Sergeant Ragsdale. But he told me this quote, and it just always stuck with me, and it sticks with me every single day. And when I hear the word complacency, I immediately think of it. And it's, I train to be perfect. Perfect I will never be. Therefore, I will always train.
Yeah.
Complacency kills. It kills ambition. It kills dreams. It kills everything because you get into just this cycle.
Yeah.
And you stay in your comfort zone. And when you stay in your comfort zone, you don't grow. You stop growing. And you stop expanding your horizons. And you stop just, you stop living and you just exist.
Yes.
And that's why for me, always keep moving. People are always like, hey man, like, dude, you're always doing something. You're always up to something. You know what I mean? Yeah. Cause I'm always challenging myself to become better, to become, stronger, right? To give more, to be open to receiving more. Yeah. It's just complacency kills, man.
Yes.
And yeah. So definitely want to I want to talk about a little bit about you. I know you're law enforcement, you're a family man, you're an entrepreneur, man. Tell us about that, man. I like that shirt you got on, man. That's dope.
I appreciate it. So I would say not new to entrepreneurship, however, new to finally making decisions.
Hey.
Which I found is probably a lot of people. So there's probably some people that can relate to that. I think for me, I have always challenged myself through learning. And I told you in the beginning, I finally kind of really started to appreciate learning once I got into law enforcement and started to learn about things I liked. But when I started to learn about the job a little bit. But what I realized is after I got in, I was looking for new ways to challenge myself, and how I was doing it was that drive where I'm off of work, but I'm looking for work was constantly coming back. And I was finding, well, I could just go into work. There's overtime to be had. There's money to be made. I'll just go make it. And I realized that I wanted to do something else outside of law enforcement. And I'd see business owners and stuff, and I always knew, like, eventually I wanted to be, and I still want to be, a business owner. That's my goal. I think I would be a successful business owner. So I continued. I would just research and I would learn, and I'd go to YouTube University or wherever I could to pull information from. Before I knew it, man, I was learning about businesses left and right, and I'd go through the whole entire phase on how to start a specific company and a franchise or whatever, and I'd go through all of the phases, and honestly, probably, unfortunately, to an extent, probably wasted a lot of people's time on giving me that information. Hopefully not. Hopefully I was able to give some in the same aspect, but I went through all of those processes, but never really came to the decision and never really pulled the trigger. And I think for a while in my life, that was kind of becoming a part of me, where I was getting all the way up to the final word and then couldn't jump the fence. I'd get all the way to the top and couldn't climb back down. And I never realized it until I finally did. And what I ended up doing was getting my real estate license. So me and my wife, a little crazy. We were
a little crazy.
We were moving and buying houses, not even flipping, really just flipping equity. Our average was about 13 to 15 months. And we'd buy a house. We stayed in, I think we bought our first house in 2016-ish, somewhere in there, 17 maybe. About 11 months in, we'd be cruising on Zillow, get the urge again, and I'd realize, hey, I think this house that we've bought, we've made some pretty good equity in this. And it was just good markets to be in and good places to be in. We flip it. We turn around, we buy another house 13, 14 months later, flip it. So we were doing that for a little while, and I realized pretty early in that venture the two of us loved real estate. And that's really why we did it, is we would just get the urge to kind of cruise on looking at houses, and we'd go around on some weekends if we were going to the grocery store and we see a new neighborhood pop up, and we'd walk through the neighborhood, tour some of the houses, have no intention of buying until we did.
Till you did.
Yeah, until we did.
Gotcha.
Till we walked in and we're like, well, this is kind of nice. We're influenced pretty easy when it came to real estate. But we just constantly did that. And through those processes, realizing obviously we had a very good, very, very good realtor who I still talk to, still kind of keep in touch with. She's awesome. She helped us through every single one of those. And then I started working with a guy. He also did real estate. Well, just before I started working, while I was doing my job as law enforcement, I realized, I want to get my real estate license. So I went through all of the process, all the tests, everything. Went all the way up to finally taking like the state exam. Never took it. So went through all of it. And when I told him that, he obviously gave me some choice words of like, what is wrong with you? That's a lot of work to be going through. So we laughed about it. And he kind of pushed me to go get my license. You already went through this. That's a huge step. He was a realtor himself and a cop, and said, you need to go finish this. So I did. Kind of really put my head down, hammered it out, pushed myself. Now it was like somebody else was pushing me. There was somebody else like waiting on me almost. So I felt kind of encouraged to finally take that last step, which was huge. When I finally took that last step, my wife and I had just had the baby. And within 2 weeks, I had a newborn. Ooh. And took my state exams for real estate. So it was quite a lot going on in the household and everything else. But I did it. I pushed myself to climb back down the fence. Finally completed a project, if you will. And it affected me a lot more than I even would have expected. I mean, I was going through life past that point and like really making it known like, hey, I can make that other decision. If I do want to eventually take this badge and this, everything off and leave this life behind, I can. I have the ability. I have something else. I have something else to start growing. I have something that's constantly challenging me. And that was really my first, I guess, real part of entrepreneurship. Certainly the first time I ever had real social media in my life, which I'm still not very good at, but that's neither here nor there. I think for me, I got on pretty quickly with the whole like mentor idea. I absolutely love the aspect of it. I think I was using mentors without really knowing much about them. And I had learned some stuff, from other entrepreneurs through my little journeys of learning about businesses and stuff. I had seen some, you got to have mentors in certain aspects. But what I really realized is once I got into real estate and I would hear people talking about mentors and what they did, and it was nothing to do with what that mentor actually did to give knowledge. Most of the knowledge was already known. Mm-hmm. What it was that expectation of somebody being over your shoulder waiting on you. And that's why I use those terms. I had a mentor without even having a mentor. I didn't ask my buddy who was a cop and a realtor to be a mentor to me. We were just joking about the fact he had his license, and I went through the whole process and never pressed send. Mm. That right there was a mentorship, because from that point he said, go get your license, dummy. What are you doing? That right there was a mentor, because he was on my shoulder and I was saying every time I wanted to, I'll just take a break. It'll be fine. I'll let it go. These things are time sensitive. You got to get it done at a certain point. And he would be over my shoulder without really being there. It would just be mentally. He was there. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I probably should get this done, because he's expected me to get this done. And that was super important for me. So then I realized, okay, mentors, I see the benefit. I just watched it happen. Had I had a mentor prior to this, I probably would have owned another business somewhere, right? It would have been something. So I got into real estate in around 2022, kind of rolled with it for a while, and then had somebody else reach out and say, hey, have you ever heard this project? It's called the 10-7 Project. It's a group of cops who became realtors, and their whole goal is to effectively change the lives of 10,000 officers, firemen, first responders through real estate and give them another option. And so, yeah, like the service side of it is huge. And it's also, it's people who you're like-minded with. It's people who you're going to get along with. Realistically, in their communities, they should be people that you're trusting, right? So got connected with them, went through the whole process with them. Super simple. Obviously, it's just like a simple Zoom call, and immediately knew this is the right area. So the brokers that they're with, Real Brokerage, that's the one I'm with now. That's kind of like our mother brokerage that handles all the, the overhead real estate stuff. Real Brokerage is just now, it's becoming a massive brokerage in the real estate space, just like any other big brokerage that's out there. Our group is a small section of that, but that's what we're doing, is we're essentially becoming mentors. Each individual agent is just an additional mentor for the group, for somebody else that they can effectively change. That's powerful, and say, hey, if you're a cop, if you're a fireman, whatever you may be, you can be a teacher. I mean, if you're in that space and you want to effectively change your life or have another option, have you thought about real estate? And what it comes down to is what we've realized is cops are actually pretty good at negotiations.
Who would have thought?
It's crazy, right?
A little verbal judo.
And it's so funny because I never thought about it in that aspect until I got into the group, listened to some of their stuff and read their book and really started to hammer in some of the mastermind groups and everything. And what I realized is a lot of the same traits and stuff that they're teaching in that group are exactly the same ones that we're learning in law enforcement, just tailored for a different arena. And people have forgotten how to talk to others, and I don't mean it in a confrontational way even, right? Like we always say, you know, people fear confrontation. Like I think that's an aspect, but I think people just fear having conversations. I don't think it has anything to do with confrontation. Maybe there's an aspect of I'm afraid of confrontation happening during that conversation, but I've realized that a lot. You talk to these if you get to talk to these other realtors who are not in our group and you can't get them on the phone. I've had so many people that I've tried to reach out to for clients or whoever, and I'm saying, hey, email, text, calls, nothing. Just ghosted.
Yeesh.
Right? And then you're finally thinking to yourself, well, how are they doing a service to their own clients? Like, I have a client that wants to buy your house or, you know, wants to rent your house or whatever it may be. And I can't get in touch with you. And then finally it'll be like a short little text back. Hey, sorry. Like 3 days later, you're like, dang.
Already moved on, bro.
I didn't realize business was like that. You just had so many options out there, you know?
It's crazy.
It is crazy. But yeah, so our group is growing day by day. It's huge. I actually brought on the mentor that I talked about that got me into this. So I brought him into the group, which was awesome. It's kind of a full circle moment. The two of us work together again, I should say. And, we have a pretty good time. He's awesome.
Man, that is awesome.
Yeah. So here we are.
Yeah. So you said the brokerage is called Real?
Yeah. So it's Real Brokerage.
Real Brokerage. I love the name, man. It's very simple, but
yes,
it's effective.
Yeah, and their whole idea is kind of changing the game on real estate right now. They're very technology forward and stuff like that. In a world where real estate was really behind the times in some aspects, some of the other brokerages and stuff are doing similar things, but Real's kind of really pushing that gas pedal and trying to be at the forefront of all of it, which is awesome.
So, Zach, I have one more question for you.
Bring it. Come on.
What is something that people might be surprised to learn about you? The Zach, not the officer Zach, or
yeah, I'd probably say I'm a closet nerd.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd probably say I'm a closet nerd.
Yep.
I'm all about the Harry Potter, Star Wars, Marvel Universe, all that stuff.
LARPing.
I wouldn't say, not knocking the LARPers out there, but no, okay. I don't like to live fake life.
I didn't know how deep it went.
I just want to escape a little bit mentally to the fantasy world. I don't need to reenact the fantasy world. So I guess maybe not that far.
Okay. Just want to see how deep it went.
I'm a closet nerd, but
okay.
Yeah, I like it. So I'm all about that life. I'd say that's probably my biggest thing. I put it on the forefront. I'm a big college football fan. Love my dogs. But yeah, probably a closet nerd.
Well, thanks for sharing that, man. Before we let you go, bro, I just want to thank you for coming out.
All right.
Sharing a little bit of your story.
Thank you, man. This has been awesome.
I think you're just a phenomenal human being. I enjoy all the time that I spend with you. I spend a lot of time with you. You know what I mean? For me to be like, hey, I genuinely like talking to this guy a lot. That you just don't get that with me. True. But what we have here for you is a custom called the Surf challenge coin that we created, and it's just a token of appreciation because
that is awesome, man.
Thank you. Our slogan's on the back of it. Serving those who serve others, and I think that if the world would be a different place if people kind of adopted a you first mentality. And that doesn't mean to become a doormat. That doesn't mean to let people walk all over you or to, just become a pushover. It just means, just serve first.
Yes.
And sometimes it can help a lot to put the needs of others before your own. If it comes down to being right or being kind, be kind.
Absolutely, man.
You know?
I think for all of us, we really search for that in all of the relationships. When that's something that's on your mind, we search for that in the relationships that we create with others. And I think that's what was so easy about the project that I'm in with for the real estate stuff is that's their whole mindset is not just affecting the officers that they can get a real estate license and change their life through business and all that. Has nothing to do with that. There's an expectation for them that every client they serve has nothing to do. They push relationships over transactions. And as I'm reading the book, I'm listening to their podcast or whatever it may be. I'm going through their lessons, and that's a constant push. And I kept thinking to myself, what business does that? Like, that's not a first rule of business, right? You read any business making book, or at least now you're kind of seeing it more and more, but throughout traditional history of creating a business, that's not really the one, effectively talk about profits and losses and everything else. They're like, no, I don't care about the transaction at all. I care about the relationship that I have with those people. And I think once you push that first, it can certainly be self-serving in the idea of where it takes your business. But I think having that mentality and really going through life with that open net of looking for others who are serving others will certainly bring some good light to your life and some good positivity. So that's why I found it with you.
Definitely appreciate that. I definitely consider myself to be more relational than transactional.
Absolutely.
I think that relationships are the highest form of currency. And I stand by that.
Could be another tattoo.
It could be. Relationships can be the difference between someone chasing money and money chasing them.
Hey, I like it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, bro, appreciate you coming out.
Absolutely, big dog.
It's always an honor, man. And we have to get you to come back.
Definitely.
And drop some more nuggets on us.
Come on.
All right, bro. Till next time.
Sounds good, bro. Appreciate you.